Then there's the Bill Cosby case. And Tom was the lead lawyer on the second trial, and he brought you in as well.
Yeah.
Tom has said this was the most unfair,
insane
case that he had ever been involved in.
Insane.
This was the most unfair trial of my career. Consider the following. First of all, they did not file the case in time. It's what is called a statute of limitations issue. You have to file a case in a certain amount of time, or you can't file it at all. We did our research and proved they didn't file this case on time. We filed our motion and all our evidence, and the judge refused to have a hearing on statute of limitations. That's what we call a jurisdictional issue. The case should never have been tried. There was no jurisdiction, but the judge wouldn't even have a hearing on that. Second of all, the prior district attorney of Montgomery County testified under oath that he made an agreement with Mr. Cosby's prior lawyers that Cosby would not be prosecuted, and because he was not going to be prosecuted, he should take a civil deposition. And that former district attorney to this day maintains, I entered into a binding agreement not to prosecute him. There was a hearing on that agreement, and the trial judge ruled that the former DA was incredible.
What made it so unfair from your point of view?
The backdoor history between the prosecutor, the former prosecutor, and the judge. Again, we're Californians. We don't know the nonsense that goes on in Montgomery County, and frankly could care less. But you have a judge who, at the time, years earlier, was running against the prosecutor. I'm so sorry. What's the judge's name? I've forgotten.
This is the Pennsylvania judge?
Yeah. O'Neill?
Stephen T. O'Neill.
O'Neill. Okay. Sorry. So you have Judge O'Neill, who years before is running for district attorney against Bruce Castor. Bruce Castor was the DA who ultimately told Cosby, we're not prosecuting you. Go ahead and do your deposition. And in fact, he had taken the position at the time that there were these pending allegations that were not being prosecuted yet coming out of Los Angeles County. So Bruce Castor had taken the position, let California deal with Cosby. He's not our problem. So O'Neill and Castor had a debate. Judge O'Neill was having an affair with another DA in the office. He's married. So when they had the debate, O'Neill's wife, of course, showed up, and Castor had the girl with whom he was having the affair sit next to his wife. Now, mind you, he's her boss. Castor is this woman's boss.
Right.
So he says, I want you to sit there for the debate. She goes and she sits there because if in fact he wins again, then she has to work for him, or she can quit. She can do whatever she wants. So Castor's theory was to rattle O'Neill, and my understanding is it worked quite nicely. And so now you have this antagonistic behavior between the two of them, and in fact, Castor did win. So now you have this antagonism between the two of them, and in the interim, O'Neill ran for judge and was elected the judge of this case. He had no business taking this case. He was so emotionally angry at Castor. We didn't even bring Castor was going to come in and testify, and we thought, what's the point? It's just going to cause a knockdown, drag out on the, it's going to open so many cans of worms. It's not worth it. So, I mean, just at the onset, it was completely insane. So when he was not convicted the first time and got a hung jury, the judge had allowed only one, again, with the federal jurisdiction is 404B, they had allowed one prior bad act, the same as in Jackson. They had allowed one prior bad act witness to come in and testify. And this woman claimed that this allegation was somewhere in the mid-late 90s. But when she got on the stand and was being questioned, it turned out that it was somewhere in late 80s, early, or 1990, in fact, many, many years apart. And so she was not credible. There was a witness named Margot Jackson that became an issue. I have a personal pet peeve with that issue if you want to get into that. But Margot Jackson was a traveling companion of Andrea Constand at the time, and said that Andrea had made up this story that she said, wouldn't it be great just to sort of railroad somebody and file a civil suit or threaten whatever and get a lot of money? Pretty much exactly what she ultimately did with Cosby. And Mario Jackson was not allowed to testify in the first trial. So when we got involved, all of a sudden, not only did Judge O'Neill kick it back to 1983, you can bring in prior bad acts to 1983 as if your alleged behavior in 1983 has any relevance to your alleged behavior in 2003. I don't know about you, but I'm not the same person in 03 that I was in 83. Neither here nor there. And then they allowed up to 5 people. Where I sort of fell into play is they gave us a list of 19 potential witnesses. And the DA could pick any one of those, but they didn't have to announce it until 30 days before trial. So a vast majority of my time was conducting these in-depth backgrounds on these other 19 people. Again, that didn't, of only 5 who were called.
Well, one of the things that you said, which was kind of interesting, was Bill Cosby's wife wrote a letter, a very angry letter, to the judge.
Correct.
Before the sentencing.
Again, by that time we had been fired. I don't know what she was thinking. Again, I only dealt with her the one day. The closing arguments, she showed up. I don't know what she could have been thinking, antagonizing or calling names or notice, claims of corruption to a judge, 3 hours before he's sentencing your husband to as much as 10 years. I don't know who told her this would be a good idea. It was an incredibly stupid idea, obviously. And there were multiple attorneys who they had gone through in the interim. Part of the problem with these large, high profile, I hate that term, these celebrity type cases, you get people who just want to be part of it. So you get people who are willing to do things potentially for nothing. There's these strange beliefs that people have all of this money. Michael Jackson paid, what was it, $350? Where you get all of this money, but a lot of these people, frankly, don't. Cosby didn't have tons and tons and tons of money. And if he did, we certainly didn't have access to it. In fact, my bill was paid for by the insurance company because there was a parallel civil investigation. The insurance company was paying me because the work that I was producing for the criminal was also being used for the potential upcoming civil. And I believe he had a $10 million policy. So if you remember quite publicly, Cosby went bananas when Greenberg Gross got down, whittled that $10 million down to like 3 left and settled out one of the lawsuits for the $3 million that they had left. And again, Cosby went completely ballistic over that. I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, I remember he was upset that there was any level of settlement because from the outside looking in, the public feels that a settlement means that you're guilty.
Sure.
When in fact, as someone who's been through lawsuits before, a settlement just usually means it's cheaper to do this than to go to trial and potentially spend more on the defense than what the settlement is.
And part of the problem is, at least in California, and that was a California lawsuit, at least in California, insurance laws afford the insurance companies to make decisions you don't have to agree with.
Right. Yeah, it's just a money thing. It's just a number for them.
Right. Exactly.
Is this number cheaper than this number? Great. We'll go with this number. Exactly. It doesn't matter what else. Yeah. And ultimately, Bill Cosby's still in prison today. And
September is his 3 years. Now it was 3 to 10. It's now up to the warden. And I think because of the security factors and the cost factors, number one, he is blind. So they have to be able to provide additional security. It's their job to protect him.
Yeah.
So I think they'll kick him at 3.
Right. Well, then there's also the appeal that they're working on right now.
Yes.
Which he may win as well. So we'll see.
I think he should. Ebony Benson, who was one of the publicists, has written a book. Can't wait to read it. It's being released in June about the trial and the appeal and the process and working in the what would you call it? In the wings with Cosby. She was very, very active with Andrew Wyatt. doing all of the publicity and handling everything and being very outspoken. And Ebony's got a book coming out June 1st, I believe, coming up.
Well, Scott Ross, quite a career, and you had your hands in so many different cases, so many different high-profile cases. But, in general, you even said that you actually take more cases on for free than you do than the ones that you get paid for. So,
wasn't always like that.
Wasn't always like that, but now you can. So, and it's interesting. When I interviewed Tom, he kind of told me the same type of thing. Yeah. Although he has these big dollar, high profile celebrity cases, he also has a free legal clinic in South LA, and he goes down south to protect
once a year
to take on murder cases for people he feels are innocent and so forth. So, it's interesting to have that type of balance in your life.
And I'm involved with Fighting for Freedom. It's an organization, a woman named Karen Morrison out of Virginia. And she takes on these cases of people who are in custody and is involved in their appeal and trying to find new information. And again, I don't get paid for that, but I enjoy working with Karen. And again, I don't want to see anybody in custody that doesn't need to be.
Yeah. So out of all the thousands of cases that you've worked on over the years, what do you think is your favorite case?
My favorite case was Rampart, but that's a long other story. The one that didn't make the media, that didn't make the news, was a kid named Davian Hayes. Davian was convicted of 1 murder and 3 attempts. He's a kid from a really nice family, from Inglewood, and was down there over by South Crenshaw area. There's a place called Chris Burger that was very popular among the kids. It was, when I was a kid growing up in the Valley, it was our Van Nuys Boulevard kind of thing. And he and his friends were going by there, and somebody started shooting at them. Davian had a gun in his possession, registered to him, and he fired back. The police attributed the death of this kid to Davian's having fired the gun. The problem is that 5 separate weapons that we know of, again, sometimes, and for an example, in a case where somebody's using a revolver, it doesn't leave casings behind. So somebody could be firing a gun and there's nothing remaining to show that. And in this particular case, the kid that got hit, that died, was shot in the neck, and it was a through and through. He didn't go down. He went and he jumped in his cousin's car, who drove him around for 10 minutes trying to take him to a hospital, but he didn't know where a hospital was. His cousin wasn't from the neighborhood. And he brought him back to the scene and physically just shoved him out, because the police and paramedics were there, just shoved him out of the car on the ground. So again, when they ultimately track down the car and they find out that he's got a gun and he's fired the gun, and, but there were casings that were left behind. I believe 1 casing they found of the 2 shots, 1 ended up in the car. The kid who was driving the car, his car was hit with 2 separate bullets, and the police went after him for the murder. Now, again, if you have no trajectory, you have no projectile, nothing was ever recovered from the kid that passed away. And understand, I'm very sorry about the kid that died. Another kid was shot in the butt. The projectile remained in his rear, and nobody ever bothered to try and go in there and get it to identify what gun that was at least fired from. And the other kid was shot, I think he got hit in the back and was a paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair. So the problem was by the time we got involved, now again, this is Harlan Braun. The family had contacted Harlan Braun. The kid had an appellate attorney, William Copany, who got this reversed and got Davian a new trial. The problem is that Copany had passed away in the interim, but Harlan and I took the case over, and I reinvestigated what I could of the case. And one of the issues is that the father of the kid, who was a paraplegic, handed the LAPD a bullet fragment and claimed that a year after the fact, the doctor had handed him, well, I shouldn't say. So he's saying at the time that they removed the bullet from his son, the doctor came out and said, "Here, this is what caused it," and handed him a bullet fragment. A year after that, This guy goes to the police and said, here's the bullet fragment that the doctor gave me. So here's the fly in the ointment. Number one, it doesn't work like that. The person who's in charge, this was at Cedars-Sinai, the person who is in charge of their security unit is a former LAPD homicide detective. I had worked with him in the past. I contacted him and he said, absolutely not. That's not how our process works. If there's a bullet in a body, it's going to be investigated no matter what. The doctors know if you extract a bullet, he's there at the surgery. He takes that bullet and it's got a whole process before it gets turned over. The bullet had blood on it. Before they tested the blood, they could have swabbed it to see if it even came from this kid. And in fact, here's the irony. The ballistics person they use, who is now my ballistics expert, her husband is head of serology for the, retired now, but at the time was head of serology for the LAPD. So it's not like if somebody gives her a bullet, she doesn't know where to go to have the blood swabbed off and tested to even confirm whether it came out of this individual. So again, as things started to mount, we were able to prove that, okay, he fired a gun, but it doesn't mean that he hit anybody. The other 4 guns that were identified through what's called NIBIN, it's a national gun base. When they recover a casing or they recover a projectile, if it can be identified, it's entered into NIBIN, tantamount to like fingerprints are entered into a computer. Anyway, short version is all 4 of these guns, these remaining weapon parts, whatever they were, whether they were projectile, were identified as being used in other gang type shootings and other police reports. Davian had absolutely no criminal history. I think a speeding ticket or, exhibition of speed or reckless something. And that was it. And the fact is that they just targeted him because they found somebody who was there who had actually fired a weapon. The bullet fragment itself was out of a Glock, and Glocks have what's called, can't believe I'm drawing a blank. Glocks have a specific type of rifling, which is not lands and grooves. It's like taking the metal and just physically twisting it so you don't have the lands and grooves. I'm drawing a total blank on what it's called. Anyway, neither here nor there, we were able to prove that it wasn't Davian. Plain, flat out, whatever. We were ready to go to trial. And the DA came along, and instead of acknowledging that they made a mistake, the LAPD, instead of acknowledging that they may have been wrong, that they just offered him to do 3 more years. And so, he's a sweet kid with a great family. He didn't want to put them through the nonsense. So Davian took the deal against my better judgment, against Harlan's better judgment. But I get it, bird in the hand. They insisted he was a gang member. I mean, it was just the case was so incredibly screwed up by the LAPD. They surveilled him for weeks and didn't find anything. And, that was my favorite, probably my favorite. And to this day, he's out.
He's out now.
He is out, yes.
Great news.
Yeah.
Great news.
Yeah, great kid, great family.
Well, Scott Ross, I appreciate you sharing, man. Quite a story, quite a life. And it seems like you've got a lot more to come. Nah, you're done? You're retired?
I'm at that stage. Do you know what that is?
What's that?
I'm older, I'm fatter, I'm slower. Anything that ends with an ER, I'm there. I'm balder, I'm stupider, I'm lazier, I'm dumber, I'm at that stage that if a case comes, I'll take it. I'll get involved if I think I can make a difference. If it's, I was, for what it's worth, I was contacted. I'm going to be doing the Scott Peterson retry once they get through all of that nonsense and figure out what they're going to do with that. So we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Until next time. Peace.